In Elden Ring, there are various ways to move. You can walk, jump, roll, and run. But what happens if you can't move at all? Can you beat Elden Ring without walking? Before we get started, let me explain the rules to you. I can't walk, I can't run, I can't roll, and I can't jump. And I also can't use a horse. I did that for fun. Mostly I won't be able to use my left joystick, so the only way to move is to attack or to use Ashes of War. I started by giving my character the least offensive name I could think of, and making him devilishly handsome, and hobbled my way into the lands between. My first order of business was to get the ability to level up and runes to level up with, so I swang like a madman as fast as I could. By nightfall I had reached the Firekeeper, who by some sick joke thought it'd be amusing to give me a tool I couldn't use. Headed towards the third church of Marika, and I encountered my first problem. Intentionally I'm leaving my finger off the left joystick so I don't accidentally walk, but I also can't change direction when being attacked. The only way I can change direction is by aiming my bow, which leaves me open for attack and takes way too long to focus. And the bow at this upgrade level is completely useless, especially at a distance. But nonetheless, I reach my destination and get ready for the hard part. Caelid. I shoved myself in the magic glory hole and got my body ready for the torments that awaited it. And torment there was. Being underleveled in an area with high level enemies is painful, especially when you're trying to run with no legs. Under my muffled screams of pain and frustration, I somehow made it past Placidusax. Maybe he was too stupid to kill me, maybe he just felt sorry for me. The world may never know. Another thing about not using a horse is I can't ascend on Spirit Springs, so in order to get to Fort Feroth, I had to go down to Lean's Rise just to climb back up to Fort Feroth. Only after 100 hemorrhoids and 3 hours of crawling my ass across the dirt, I finally made it to Fort Feroth. I celebrated by ritualistically slicing an elderly comatose dragon until it gave me all of its runes. In that moment of murderous fervor, it came to me like a dream on a cloud. I knew at that moment what I should become. In order to shoulder the ordeal that I must endure, I must become something more. A brick shithouse, a moving tank, something slow like a sloth but impenetrable like a brick fortress. Armed with my new passion and a stomach full of macaroni and cheese, I glided upwards to the north to see a man about armor. Sir John Stamos put up a hell of a fight, but it was no match for my strength. After turning his insides into confetti, the first part of my mission was done. With my new three-piece suit, I felt like a monkey with a handgun. Something shiny and new to look at, with enough moral ambiguity to leave enough carnage in my wake that would leave the Elder Gods shaking in their boots. And with that we were on to our first boss. Armed with my butter knife and my fancy glidey moonwalk, I put enough poison in him to give him cervical cancer for the next 5 generations of his offspring. This is about the time I started to realize how important it is to turn in Elden Ring. I couldn't properly maneuver up the main gate, and when I hit a corner I'd be surrounded by enemies like a group of middle school bullies trying to take my lunch money. After hours of trying, it was by pure happenstance that I made it out of this area. But we all knew the true culprit. The whole reason why I spent 6 hours trying to get through the main gate was because I couldn't turn fast enough, but I had an ace in the hole, a specific tool made for gods and gentlemen alike. The paintbrush of the peeping Tom, the telescope. Now all I had to do was hit square in order to change the direction in which I was moving. To others it may not seem like much, but to me it opened a whole universe of possibilities. I collected what meager upgrade items I could, along with a new toy to play with, and continued to Liurnia of the Lakes. Reenacted the ending scene from my favorite Liam Neeson movie, The Grey. After about 2 hours of getting swamp-ass in Liurnia, I finally had enough to upgrade my weapon. The thing about Round Table Hold is that you can't use an Ash of War or an attack in order to get around, hence one of the reasons why I bought the telescope in the first place. So what you have to do is backstep the whole time. You have to focus on the wall and backstep until you get to where you want to be. It's actually kind of a pain in the ass to do. At this point my dagger was +5, but I feared that it was a micro dagger and Godric would only laugh at me. So I decided to get my fingertips around something a little more girthy and long. Helped a police officer end petty crime in a local neighborhood, and then committed a petty crime myself against the baldest man I know for a +7 spear. watched helplessly as a person tried to atone for the crimes against nature by yeeting themselves off a bridge. After contracting dragon gonorrhea and the gift of faith, it was time to take on another one of God's nameless abominations, and decided to kill it because the only nameless abomination that can exist in the lands between is me. The fight went as good as you would think if you had no legs and you had to fight a demigod. At some point I basically lost all my heals and decided to run around in circles until the gonorrhea killed him. And so my quest began to kill a second demigod. I decided on the Lord of Blasphemy, which means I would have to kill a godskin noble in order to fight him. The easiest way to dispatch a godskin is by using NyQuil, and the only recipe for the NyQuil pots is on a hillside that you have to scale down and traverse by a series of jumps or using a horse. Unfortunately, I'm unable to do both, so I had to move my way down by using weapon arts. When I finally got to the location of where the recipe was, I wasn't able to get up there using the Ashes of War, and took about 20 minutes to realize I was going to need a different ash in order to get on top of the coffin. So I headed north towards Loretta and upgraded the Reduvia to +4 that I had gotten off of the scrub earlier. The Reduvia made light work of Loretta, and I acquired Loretta Slash. Now came the moment of truth to see if it worked, and believe me, I was terrified that it wouldn't. But when it did, I was so excited I actually screamed out loud. After fetching an old lady her necklace and meeting her back at Altus Plateau, she kidnapped me and brought me to the Volcano Manor, where I tried to do my best Bill Cosby on the Michelin Man. Luckily, Godskin Noble is extremely weak to both sleep and bleed, so I just made him fall asleep until he bled out, and then when he woke up again, put him back to sleep. By this point, I'd literally been dragging my ass across deserts, lakes, and volcanoes. It had been about 10 hours since I started the run, and I wasn't even halfway through the game. The torture really began to set in, and I hadn't even killed the second demigod. I made my way through Volcano Manor, killing anyone I found, because it was easier to kill them than it was to avoid them. Finally at the Lord of Blasphemy, I unwittingly found a strategy that was very effective without even thinking about it. I've never really used shields in this game, so I don't really know how effective they can be, even though I've done a shield-only run. But with the shield and the spear, it was quite effective against the snake. Spears have a unique ability to be able to attack while blocking, which means if something's attacking you, you won't take damage, and you will continue to attack them. It also increases the speed of the attack from the spear itself, which means that you can get a lot more DPS with using a shield than you would without. With the second demigod slain, I was on my way to the capital to fight the Draconic Knight. I utilized the same strategies I did with the last few bosses, only mixing both poison and the shield for blocking. I had also acquired a new weapon, the Sword of Blasphemy, which does passive healing as well as a bunch of fire damage. To some, it's one of the best weapons in the game. It's definitely overpowered a bit. The strategy for traversing the lands did not change just because we entered the capital, and was getting a bit tiring at this point. We were almost halfway through the game, and I started to feel how bad this run really was. 15 hours and we were finally ready to fight Godfrey. I can usually beat this game in about 4 hours, or about 2 hours in the fastest time. So we were literally dragging ass through the whole game. Godfrey is one of my more consistent bosses. I could probably beat him blindfolded with a car battery strapped to my testicles, so Sunbro Godfrey wasn't much of a challenge even with the current restrictions. For Mardrin the Omen King, I used every cheese strat available in the book. I used his seal, the rot breath, my jellyfish, and I even summoned the firekeeper to keep him busy. We must have danced at least for 15 minutes, dancing as best as I could with no legs at least, till the poison finally took him to the big retirement home in the sky. I glid, I hobbled, I hopped, on my first mountain adventure as a Tarnished, on my way to meet the Greybeards. I started to wonder if this run was truly a good idea, not that I have many. Most of my ideas end up being pretty terrible for me. By the time I had gotten to the foot of the forge, I was so disgusted, I decided to end the stream there, and I legitimately did not pick up this challenge for months. Until something happened. A fire grew back inside of me. I had been a pussy long enough. It was time to change that. And this time I had me a plan. I collected the ant spear rapier from the loser on the hillside, and then murdered a furry. Had me a little Cajun style barbecue, so I could gain access to Bogue's little plasma clinic underground. grabbed my inheritance from my dead grandmother, and upgraded the End Spear Rapier to plus 19 because we were on a mission to save a long-lost hero. 2, actually. You see, thinking ahead, I realized I needed the Kool-Aid Man and the Mimic Tier to help me fight the Fire Giant, which means I needed to beat Radon, so I summoned the boys to help me with that portion of it. And I would also have to fight the Wyvern near Seathwater Terminus as well, so I could talk to the Kool-Aid Boy afterwards. I died here several times in the second phase because of the meteoric attack, but with use of Vow of the Indomitable, I survived the second half and we finally beat him after a few tries. Descended into the Devil's Anus, and lived out the fantasy of murdering myself. There was nothing that could stop me, except for walls and ledges, of course, that I couldn't jump over. But other than that, I started to feel invincible in this run. Having acquired the Mimic Tier, I had a lackey that would do the work for me now. So the run would be a little bit easier. Not completely easy, but a little bit easier since we gathered him. I upgraded him to plus 6 and then we moved on to the Wyvern. Talked to the Kool-Aid Man while he was taking a hot bath, and we were ready for the Fire Giant finally. The Fire Giant's usually a big pain in my ass when it comes to crazy challenge runs like this. He usually flops all over the place and he won't sit still. But surprisingly, the second fight we had with him was pretty good. It only took 2 attempts to actually kill him, which is a rare feat, especially with such a hard challenge run. It just took a long time for him to die. And like that, we were on our way to Crumbling Farm Missoula. There's not much to say about Crumbling Farm Missoula aside from using the same strategies we've been using the whole game, which is crawling across, killing every enemy basically until we make it to a grace. Nothing to really report aside from that. I can only talk about so much because of the video length. I'm just going to gloss over some stuff and not be able to talk about absolutely everything that happened along the way. And it was time for the Laurel and Hardy fight. After respecking to Arcane so that I could make a bleed build really quickly, I infused the End Spear Rapier with bleed and had the Mimic go ham on him. This was another boss fight that surprised me with how smooth it went. Because like I said, on a run like this, usually this boss is extremely difficult. But after the second attempt, for some reason we beat him easily. Maybe it was the bleed, maybe it was the sleep, or maybe it was both put together. Then I manned up and fought the second Draconic Knight without a shield, just using quick step to dodge. Unfortunately, I can't move forward or backward with the left stick still. And so, the main hurdle had arrived, Malekith, the bad doggo of death. This boss took me forever to beat, mostly because RNGesus kept screwing me over and over and over and over again. Mostly because he would corner me as soon as I walked through the fog gate and I couldn't advance further into the arena to do anything at all. I couldn't get away from him so that I could start fighting him. I couldn't summon the Mimic Tier. I basically got trapped in the corner almost every attempt except for maybe 3 or 4 until we finally got enough good RNG to put the bad doggo to sleep where he belongs. While I was bullying a virgin, I realized I might need help on the Godfrey fight. Even though I'm well versed in the Godfrey fight, the second phase seemed less than attractive without the ability to roll. And as an added challenge, I kinda wanted to see if I could get the Frenzied Flame ending. How do you get the Frenzied Flame ending, you may ask? Well, by going under the capital, of course, which you have to traverse by using parkour and jumps and being extremely precise. That's usually difficult with the ability to roll and jump, let alone not being able to do either or. Then fighting the reject version of Moog. And by the way, guys, I'm still not clear on why there are multiple versions of bosses in this game, whether or not they're shades or just appearances, but either way, he was bested easily. And next we had the portion that we were all dreading, the Descent to the Three Fingers. This is the most parkour intensive part of the whole entire game, and I completely finished it without rolling, walking, or jumping. And I'm actually kind of impressed that I did it. You have to watch the whole thing in its entirety. It's kind of ridiculous, honestly. Of course I sped it up, but the real MVP here was Loretta Slash. It helped quite a bit. And on the last part, I kind of took a chance to see if I could land on the edge of the map, and it worked out pretty well. Believe it or not, this only took 3 attempts in order to accomplish it. I thought it would take a shit ton more, but we did it in only 3. It started as a sick joke in chat that I should finish the game with the 3 fingers ending. After traversing most of the lands between, I figured why the hell not. We had already come this damn far and there was no going back. We were on our way to the last bosses in the game, which seemed like an amazing feat in itself because I never even thought I'd finish this run a few months back. But with the torture I had endured, it was totally worth the trek downwards to the Three Fingers. With the warm, salty embrace of madness, we were ready for Hoaraloo, the second to last boss in the whole entire game. Since I had met with the Three Fingers, it meant that I could actually summon Yura for the boss fight, which I used on the NPC summons only run. He absolutely obliterates Godfrey every single time that I use him, and with the help of the Mimic Tier, Godfrey definitely got his ass whooped. It only took one attempt. All I had to do was sit there and spam bullshit against him. At one point he actually gave up and glitched out and just let us beat his ass for no damn reason at all because he knew he wasn't going to win this fight. It felt like I was watching a 2v1 wrestling match from back in the 80s. The nostalgic smell of Ben Gay, sweaty jockstraps, and cocaine filled the air until he met his demise. And here we were, after 38 hours of a long-ass terrible playthrough. We were on Radabeast. I used a very specific strategy against Radagon, which was using poise damage to break him down, and Bloodhound Step to dodge. Seeing that Radagon and Elden Beast are both extremely weak to hammers and the poise damage that hammers do, it was quite effective. I gave the Mimic Tier the Sword of Blasphemy so he could spam fire attacks from afar, which is quite effective against Radagon. And by this point had 40 faith anyways, and removed most of my healing flasks and replaced them with blue, so that I could use Erdtree's heal and get more heals out of that as opposed to using the red flasks in the first place. It was an interesting strategy, and it worked pretty well. It only took a few attempts to actually finish this boss fight. In the second phase, it was much easier than it would have been because the Mimic had the ability to heal itself with Erdtree heal, as well as using the Sword of Blasphemy. By the second half of the second boss fight, the Mimic was still at full health, and so was I. We pummeled the ever-living crap out of the glass Loch Ness monster until he was finally dead. And I beat Elden Ring without walking, rolling, jumping, or using a horse. And that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, but if you didn't enjoy it, please leave a dislike. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. And follow me on Google, Kick, and YouTube. Just Google Forlorn Knight Gaming and you should find me. I'll also leave a link in the description. Thank you for watching.